Billionaire's son falls for a beggar. What his father does next shocks everyone. The dim hum of the city filled the air as Victor Walker stood at the head of the grand dining table. The clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of polished conversation filled the room. He wore a tailored suit that cost more than some people's yearly salaries, his presence commanding and cold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. "This dinner marks the beginning of a merger that will redefine our future. Together, the Walker Corporation and the Bellington Group will dominate global markets." Applause echoed around the table, but Victor's son, Ryan, barely heard it. He sat toward the end of the table, swirling the wine in his glass without taking a sip. Ryan's thoughts were miles away from the glittering room and the carefully curated lives of its occupants. "Ryan," Victor said sharply, breaking his reverie. "A word." Ryan excused himself and followed his father into the study, a room as imposing as the man who inhabited it. Shelves lined with leather-bound books, and a massive mahogany desk screamed power and wealth. "You seem distracted tonight," Victor said, his tone bordering on a reprimand. Ryan shrugged. "It's hard to get excited about another merger." "This isn't just another merger," Victor snapped. "This is about securing your future. Marrying into the Bellington family solidifies our position. And what if I don't want that future?" Ryan asked, his voice steady but defiant. Victor's jaw tightened. "You've been given every advantage in life, Ryan. It's time you started acting like it." Ryan said nothing, knowing any argument would fall on deaf ears. His father's world was built on power plays and transactions, and there was no room for dissent. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Ryan stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool night breeze was a welcome relief from the suffocating grandeur of his family's home. As he walked along the edge of the estate, the city lights glimmered in the distance, a stark contrast to the manicured perfection around him. His aimless steps took him toward the gates, where a small figure sat hunched against the wall. She was young, maybe a year or two younger than him, her hair tucked under a fraying scarf. A cardboard sign lay beside her, hungry and homeless. "Anything helps." Ryan stopped, taken aback. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen someone so close to his home who wasn't dressed in a uniform or carrying a delivery bag. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice breaking the quiet. The woman looked up, her eyes cautious but not unkind. "I'm fine," she said, though her thin frame and hollow cheeks told another story. Ryan hesitated, then crouched beside her. "I'm Ryan," he said, offering a small smile. "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What brings you here, Emily?" he asked gently. She glanced at the estate behind him, then back at the ground. "This is a good area. People are more likely to help." Ryan nodded, his heart tightening. "Have you eaten?" Emily shook her head. "Not today." Without thinking, Ryan stood and said, "Wait here." He disappeared back into the house and returned a few minutes later with a plate of leftover food from the party. "It's not much," he said, handing it to her, "but it's better than nothing." Emily took the plate, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Ryan sat beside her as she ate, the silence between them surprisingly comfortable. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Over the next few days, Ryan found himself thinking about Emily more than he expected. He couldn't shake the image of her sitting alone, her eyes weary but hopeful. On a whim, he returned to the gates one evening, hoping to see her again. She was there, sitting in the same spot with her sign propped beside her. When she saw him, her expression shifted from guarded to relieved. "You came back," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," Ryan said, sitting down beside her. They talked for hours that night. Emily told him about her life, how she'd grown up in a small town, dreaming of becoming an artist, but had been forced to leave when her family fell apart. She had come to the city searching for a fresh start, but the reality had been far harsher than she'd imagined. Ryan listened intently, his heart aching with each word. He couldn't understand how someone so strong and resourceful had been pushed to the margins of society, while people like him lived in excess. "You deserve better," he said finally, his voice firm. Emily smiled faintly. "Everyone says that, but it doesn't change anything." "Maybe it's time someone did something about it," Ryan said, determination sparking in his eyes. Their nightly conversations became a routine. Ryan brought her food, blankets, and small gifts, things she needed but would never ask for. In return, Emily shared her world with him, showing him the city through her eyes. But as their connection deepened, so did the complications. One night, a security guard from the estate spotted them and reported back to Victor. The next morning, Ryan found himself summoned to his father's study once again. "Who is she?" Victor demanded, his voice cold. Ryan's heart sank. "She's a friend." Victor's laugh was devoid of humor. "A beggar is not a friend, Ryan. She's a liability. She's a person," Ryan shot back, his voice rising. "And she's more decent than half the people at your dinner parties." Victor's expression darkened. "You will end this, whatever it is." "No. No," Ryan said firmly, surprising even himself. "I won't." Victor's fury was palpable, but Ryan didn't waver. For the first time, he felt like he was standing up for something, someone that truly mattered. Ryan left the study with his father's words echoing in his mind. "You will end this." But Ryan knew he couldn't, even if it meant defying everything his family stood for. Emily had shown him a world that wasn't built on wealth and power, but on resilience and humanity. He wasn't about to abandon her. That evening, as he approached the gate where Emily usually sat, he noticed her spot was empty. Panic shot through him. She had been there every night since they'd met. Where could she be? After searching the nearby streets, he found her tucked into the corner of an alley, her knees drawn to her chest. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, her face pale and drawn. "What happened?" Ryan asked, crouching beside her. "Your father," Emily said, her voice shaking. "He sent people to scare me off. They said if I didn't leave, things would get worse." Ryan's jaw clenched, anger bubbling under the surface. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault." Emily shook her head. "It's not your fault, Ryan. I don't belong in your world." "Yes, you do," Ryan said firmly. "You belong anywhere you want to be." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "What are we going to do?" "We'll figure it out," Ryan promised. "But I'm not letting him control our lives." The next morning, Ryan confronted his father again. This time, he was prepared for the fallout. "How dare you threaten her?" Ryan demanded, storming into the study. Victor barely glanced up from his desk. "I did what was necessary. She's a distraction, Ryan, a stain on our reputation." "She's a human being," Ryan said, his voice rising. "And she's more honest and kind than anyone in this house." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You're throwing your future away for a girl who has nothing to offer." "She has more to offer than you could ever understand," Ryan shot back. "She's shown me what it means to care about something real. Something that isn't bought or sold." Victor stood, his expression icy. "If you continue down this path, you will lose everything. Your inheritance, your position in this family, everything." Ryan's heart pounded, but he didn't hesitate. "Then I guess I'll lose it. Because I'm not giving up on her." Victor's face was a mask of fury as Ryan turned and walked out of the room. For the first time, Ryan felt free, even as the weight of what he had just done settled on his shoulders. Over the next few weeks, Ryan and Emily began building a life together. Ryan moved out of the estate and into a small apartment in the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was theirs. He found a job working for a nonprofit that supported homeless individuals, using his connections to help others like Emily get back on their feet. Emily, too, began to thrive. With Ryan's support, she found a job at a local art studio, where she could use her creativity and talent. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her confidence and find her place in the world. But Victor wasn't done. Determined to bring his son back into the fold, he orchestrated a public event designed to humiliate Emily and force Ryan to choose between his family and his newfound life. The event was a charity gala hosted by the Walker Corporation. Victor extended an invitation to Ryan, knowing he wouldn't refuse the chance to confront his father in public. Ryan, determined to stand his ground, brought Emily as his date. When they arrived, the room fell silent. Guests stared as the couple walked in, their whispers barely concealed. Emily felt the weight of their judgment, but Ryan squeezed her hand, grounding her. Victor greeted them with a thin smile. "I'm surprised you showed up." "We're not here for you," Ryan said, his tone steady. "We're here because we believe in the cause." Victor's smile didn't falter. How noble. As the evening wore on, Victor made his move. During his speech, he subtly referenced Emily, framing her presence as a charitable act on Ryan's part. The audience chuckled, and Emily's face flushed with embarrassment. Ryan stood abruptly, cutting Victor off. That's enough. The room went silent as Ryan stepped forward, his voice clear and strong. Emily isn't here because she needs charity. She's here because she's brilliant, compassionate, and strong. She's here because she belongs. Victor's expression hardened. Ryan, don't make a scene. No, Ryan said, his voice unwavering. You've spent your life building walls between yourself and the rest of the world. But those walls don't make you better. They make you blind. The guests murmured, their gazes shifting between father and son. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. Ryan turned to Emily, taking her hand. Let's go. As they left, the room remained silent, the weight of Ryan's words hanging in the air. In the days that followed, the fallout from the gala made headlines. Victor faced backlash for his comments, and the Walker Corporation's reputation took a hit. Ryan, however, gained widespread admiration for standing up for his beliefs. Emily became a symbol of resilience, inspiring others with her story. She was invited to speak at events, sharing her journey and advocating for those who had been overlooked by society. Victor, watching from the sidelines, began to reevaluate his actions. For the first time, he saw the cracks in the world he had built. His son's defiance had forced him to confront truths he had long ignored. Ryan and Emily left the gala hand in hand, the weight of the evening heavy on their shoulders. Once outside, Emily pulled her hand away, her eyes filled with frustration. Ryan, what were you thinking? She asked, her voice trembling. You just called out your father in front of his entire world. I was thinking I'm tired of him treating you like you're less than, Ryan replied, his voice firm. He needed to hear it, and so did everyone else. Emily shook her head. And now you've painted a target on both of us. Do you think they'll just let this go? Ryan took a deep breath, his expression softening. Emily, I don't care what they think. I care about you. About us. Emily looked away, her arms wrapped around herself. I'm not sure I can be a part of this fight, Ryan. It's too much. We'll figure it out, Ryan said, stepping closer. We've already come this far. Emily sighed, the fight draining from her. I just don't want you to lose everything because of me. I'm not losing anything, Ryan said, his tone resolute. I'm choosing what matters. The fallout from the gala spread quickly. Social media buzzed with debates about Ryan's bold stand, with some praising his courage and others condemning his disloyalty to his family. News outlets picked up the story, turning Ryan and Emily into reluctant public figures. Emily found herself thrust into the spotlight, her quiet life now the subject of intense scrutiny. Journalists dug into her past, twisting her struggles into sensational headlines. Despite her resolve, the constant attention began to wear on her. I didn't sign up for this, Emily said one evening as she and Ryan sat in their small apartment. I just wanted a chance to start over, not to have my entire life picked apart. I know, Ryan said, his voice heavy with guilt. I didn't mean for this to happen. Emily placed a hand on his. I don't blame you. But we need to figure out how to handle this together. Ryan nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. We will. Meanwhile, Victor was grappling with his own fallout. Investors were growing uneasy, questioning his ability to maintain the Walker Corporation's image. Meetings grew tense, and for the first time, Victor found himself on the defensive. Your son has become a liability, one board member said during a heated discussion. This controversy is bad for business. Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had always prided himself on his control, but now cracks were forming in the empire he had spent decades building. That evening, Victor sat alone in his study, staring at a framed photo of his family from years ago. Ryan had been a boy then, full of curiosity and warmth. When had that boy become so distant? And when had Victor stopped trying to understand him? Ryan and Emily began to push forward despite the challenges. Emily threw herself into her work at the art studio, channeling her emotions into her pieces. Her talent didn't go unnoticed, and soon she was invited to showcase her work at a local gallery. Ryan continued his efforts at the nonprofit, using his privilege to amplify voices that often went unheard. He found purpose in helping others, even as the shadow of his father loomed over him. One evening, Ryan surprised Emily with flowers as she worked late at the studio. What's this for? She asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. For being incredible, Ryan said simply. And for putting up with everything. Emily laughed softly, taking the bouquet. You're not so bad yourself. For a moment, the chaos of the outside world faded, and they were just two people finding solace in each other. Victor's curiosity about Emily grew despite himself. He had dismissed her as insignificant, but her resilience and the way she inspired Ryan gnawed him. Against his better judgment, he began to research her. What he found surprised him. Emily wasn't just a struggling artist. She was someone who had faced unimaginable hardships and emerged stronger. Her story wasn't one of defeat, but of quiet triumph. One day, Victor attended Emily's gallery show without announcing himself. He stood in the corner, watching as she interacted with patrons. She was poised, articulate, and undeniably talented. For the first time, Victor began to question whether he had been wrong. Victor left the gallery that night with conflicting thoughts. Seeing Emily in her element had unsettled him. She wasn't the opportunist he had imagined. She was someone with drive and integrity, qualities he had always respected in theory, but dismissed in her case because of her circumstances. Still, his pride wouldn't allow him to admit he might have been wrong. Instead, he doubled down, instructing his legal team to explore ways to isolate Ryan financially. If his son wanted to walk away from the family's legacy, Victor was determined to make him feel the consequences. Ryan and Emily remained unaware of Victor's growing interference. They were too focused on navigating their new lives. Emily's art continued to gain attention, and she was commissioned to create a mural for a community center. It was her biggest project yet, and the pressure was mounting. "Are you sure you don't need help?" Ryan asked one evening as he watched her sketch designs at the dining table. Emily shook her head, smiling. "I've got this. It's just a lot." "You're amazing," Ryan said, kissing the top of her head. "And when you're done, it's going to be incredible." Emily's heart swelled with gratitude. Ryan's unwavering support was her anchor, even when the world felt overwhelming. Victor's next move came swiftly. Without warning, Ryan's accounts were frozen. His access to the Walker family assets, which he had barely used since leaving, was completely revoked. Ryan found out while trying to withdraw money to fund a nonprofit event. The bank teller's apologetic expression and the words, "account restricted," sent a chill through him. "That's my father," Ryan said to Emily later that night, his jaw tight. "He's trying to control me, even now." Emily placed a hand on his arm. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I'm not going back. I'll figure it out." Emily looked at him, her heart aching. She knew how much Ryan had given up to be with her, and now he was being punished for it. "We'll figure it out together," she said softly. The tension between Ryan and Victor reached a boiling point when Victor showed up unannounced at Ryan and Emily's apartment. Dressed impeccably as always, he stood in stark contrast to the modest surroundings. "This is where you've chosen to live?" Victor said, his voice laced with disdain. "This is what you gave up everything for?" Ryan crossed his arms, his posture defiant. "What do you want, Dad?" "To make you see reason," Victor replied. "You're throwing away your future for us." Emily stood in the doorway, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "This," she said quietly. "You mean a life where your son is happy and free to make his own choices?" Victor turned to her, his gaze icy. "You've cost him everything." "No," Emily said, stepping forward. "Your expectations cost him everything. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to disrupt your world. All I ever wanted was a chance to live with dignity." Victor was momentarily taken aback by her words. Her voice wasn't angry, but it carried a conviction that left no room for doubt. Ryan stepped beside her. "She's right. I'm not throwing my life away. I'm building one that matters. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's not my life that needs reevaluating." Victor stared at them, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Emily's mural project became a beacon of hope in the midst of their challenges. She spent long hours at the community center, pouring her heart into the vibrant design. Children and families often stopped by to watch her work, their smiles and encouragement fueling her determination. Ryan visited every evening, bringing her coffee and snacks. He loved seeing her in her element, her creativity shining through every brushstroke. One day, as she added the finishing touches, a local news crew arrived to document the mural. Emily's story was shared alongside her art, and the segment quickly gained attention. Victor saw the broadcast from his office. For the first time, he saw Emily not as a threat, but as a person who had earned her place through sheer resilience and talent. The mural, with its bold colors and hopeful imagery, struck a chord he hadn't expected. The mural's unveiling was a community event like no other. People gathered in droves, some drawn by Emily's inspiring story, others by the vibrant artwork that now graced the walls of the community center. Children danced, families laughed, and for the first time in years, Emily felt truly at peace. Ryan stood proudly by her side, watching as people admired her work. "You've outdone yourself," he said, his voice filled with awe. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It's not just me. This place gave me the strength to dream again." But even amidst the celebration, shadows lingered. Victor had sent a private investigator to gather more information about Emily and the nonprofit Ryan had been supporting. The investigator's report painted Emily as a survivor, but also highlighted her struggles in a way that Victor thought might damage Ryan's reputation further. Victor decided to strike again, this time more publicly. He arranged a press conference, ostensibly to announce the new philanthropic initiative by the Walker Corporation. But in reality, it was an opportunity to undermine Ryan and Emily's efforts. Ryan and Emily watched the press conference on a small TV in their apartment. Victor stood at the podium, flanked by board members and surrounded by flashing cameras. "The Walker Corporation has always been committed to excellence and integrity," Victor began, his voice calm but commanding. "We believe in lifting people up, but we also believe in standards. Unfortunately, certain choices made by members of my family have brought unnecessary scrutiny to our name." Ryan clenched his fists as Victor continued, subtly criticizing their work without naming them directly. "This initiative," Victor said, gesturing to the banner behind him, "will set the record straight and reaffirm our commitment to meaningful, impactful change." The room erupted in applause, but Ryan and Emily felt the sting of Victor's words. "What does he think he's doing?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with anger. "Trying to erase us," Ryan said, his jaw tight. "But he's not going to succeed." The next few days were a whirlwind of media attention. Reporters sought out Ryan and Emily, asking for their response to Victor's veiled criticisms. At first, they avoided the spotlight, focusing instead on their work. But when the nonprofit Ryan worked for received an unexpected audit, and Emily's mural faced backlash from an anonymous donor threatening to revoke funding for the community center, they realized Victor's reach was deeper than they had anticipated. "We can't keep letting him dictate the narrative," Emily said one night as they sat together, exhausted but resolute. "If we don't speak up, he'll just keep doing this." Ryan nodded. "You're right. It's time we told our side of the story." With the help of a journalist sympathetic to their cause, Ryan and Emily arranged an exclusive interview. They shared everything, their struggles, their choices, and their vision for a better, more inclusive world. Emily spoke passionately about her art and her desire to inspire others, while Ryan opened up about his decision to leave his family's wealth behind. The interview aired during prime time, and its impact was immediate. People were moved by their honesty and their commitment to making a difference. Social media lit up with support, and donations to the nonprofit surged. Victor watched the interview from his study, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw his son not as a rebel, but as someone with conviction and courage. Emily, too, struck a chord with him. Her words reminded him of the values he had once believed in, but had long since buried under ambition. Despite the growing public support, the pressure on Ryan and Emily didn't let up. The nonprofit struggled to navigate the increased scrutiny, and Emily's commission slowed as potential clients hesitated to associate with someone facing controversy. One night, as they sat together on the couch, Emily turned to Ryan. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" Ryan replied. "Walking away from everything," Emily said. "Your family, your inheritance, all of it." Ryan took her hand, his gaze steady. "Not for a second. You've shown me what really matters, Emily. And it's not money or power, it's this." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I just don't want to see you lose more because of me." "I'm not losing anything," Ryan said firmly. "I'm gaining a life worth living." Victor's breaking point came when a longtime friend confronted him at a charity gala. "You've always been ruthless, Victor," the man said, his tone sharp. "But what you're doing to your own son, that's a new low." Victor bristled. "I'm doing what's best for my family." "Are you?" the man countered. "Or are you just protecting your pride? Because from where I'm standing, your son has more integrity than anyone in this room." The word stayed with Victor long after the event. For the first time, he began to question whether his actions were truly about protecting his family, or just his ego. Victor's friends' words echoed in his mind, even as he tried to dismiss them. For years, he had prided himself on making decisions that protected his family's legacy, no matter the cost. But now he wasn't so sure. Sitting alone in his study late at night, Victor poured himself a drink and stared at the family portrait on the wall. Ryan had been just a boy then, his wide grin full of innocence and trust. Where had things gone wrong? Was it when Victor started pushing Ryan toward responsibility? Or had it been earlier, when he let his own ambition take precedence over being a father? Unable to sleep, Victor opened his laptop and began watching the interview Ryan and Emily had given. He told himself it was just to assess the damage they'd done, but as their words played out, something stirred in him. Emily spoke with unwavering conviction, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "I'm not ashamed of my past. It's what shaped me. But I believe people shouldn't be judged by where they come from. It's about where they're going." Ryan's words were equally impactful. "I walked away from my family's expectations because they weren't mine. I want to create a life built on connection and purpose, not just wealth." Emily showed me what that looks like. Victor closed the laptop, his thoughts a whirlwind. He couldn't deny the strength in their words, nor the truth behind them. Meanwhile, Ryan and Emily faced mounting challenges. The nonprofit where Ryan worked had to downsize due to ongoing financial pressure, leaving Ryan without a job. Emily's mural project, though celebrated by the community, had become a lightning rod for controversy after a wealthy donor criticized its political overtones. "I feel like we're fighting a losing battle," Emily admitted one evening as they sat on a couch. "Every time we take a step forward, something pushes us back." Ryan placed a hand on hers. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but we're not alone in this. People believe in what we're doing." Emily nodded, but the weight of their struggles was hard to ignore. One morning, as Emily worked on a new piece in her studio, a deliveryman arrived with a large package. Confused, she signed for it and opened the box to find an intricately framed photograph of her mural, along with a note. "Your work is extraordinary. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Emily's brow furrowed. She didn't know anyone whose name started with V, except for Victor. When Ryan arrived home later, she showed him the package. "Do you think this is from your father?" Ryan studied the note, his expression unreadable. "It looks like it. Why would he send this?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "I don't know," Ryan admitted. "But maybe he's starting to see things differently." Emily wasn't so sure. "Or maybe it's just another way to manipulate us." Ryan sighed, unsure of what to believe. "Either way, it doesn't change what we're doing. We keep moving forward." Victor, however, was grappling with his own internal battle. After sending the package, he debated whether to reach out to Ryan directly. A part of him wanted to repair the rift between them, but another part clung stubbornly to his old ways of thinking. His assistant knocked on the door, interrupting his thoughts. "Sir, there's a call for you." "It's the board." Victor sighed, rubbing his temples. "Put it through." The board was concerned about the negative press surrounding the family. "Victor, this situation with your son is hurting the company," one member said. "If you don't resolve it soon, we'll need to take action to protect our interests." Victor felt his chest tighten. He had always been in control, but now it seemed that control was slipping away. At the same time, Ryan and Emily decided to channel their frustration into action. Together, they organized a community event to raise awareness about homelessness and poverty. Emily showcased her artwork, while Ryan shared stories from his time at the nonprofit. The event was a resounding success, drawing a large crowd and significant media attention. People from all walks of life came together to support the cause, proving that compassion could bridge even the widest divides. Victor saw coverage of the event on the evening news. He watched as Ryan spoke passionately about the need for systemic change, his words resonating with the crowd. Emily stood beside him, her presence steady and strong. For the first time, Victor felt a pang of doubt about his own choices. Was it possible that his son and this young woman, whom he had dismissed so readily, were right? And if they were, what did that say about him? Victor decided to attend the next community event in person. He didn't tell anyone, slipping into the crowd unnoticed. He watched as Ryan and Emily worked tirelessly, their dedication evident in every interaction. He saw the respect they commanded, not because of wealth or power, but because of their authenticity. As Victor stood there, surrounded by the people his son and Emily had inspired, he felt something he hadn't in years: humility. Victor left the event that night feeling an unfamiliar ache in his chest. It wasn't anger or frustration, but something softer: regret. For the first time, he began to see his son and Emily not as obstacles, but as people who had built something real, something meaningful. And for the first time, Victor realized how much he had lost by clinging to his pride. He spent the next few days in quiet reflection. The mansion felt emptier than usual, its grandeur hollow without the presence of family. The photo of young Ryan on his desk now felt like a reminder of everything he had let slip away. It was then that Victor made a decision, one that he knew would take more courage than anything he had ever done in business. Meanwhile, Ryan and Emily were thriving despite the challenges. The community event had been a huge success, bringing in donations and support for their causes. Emily's artwork gained even more attention, and she was approached by an organization to create murals across the city, each one telling a story of resilience and hope. One evening, as they sat together in their small apartment, Ryan turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if he changed?" he asked. Emily looked at him, surprised. "Your father." Ryan nodded. "He's capable of it. I've seen glimpses, but it's buried under so much control." Emily hesitated, then said softly, "If he's capable of change, it has to come from him. You can't force it." Ryan sighed, knowing she was right. "I just wish we could find some kind of peace." Emily took his hand. "Maybe someday." That someday came sooner than either of them expected. One afternoon, as Emily worked on a new mural, Ryan's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He answered hesitantly, his voice cautious. "Ryan," Victor's voice came through the line, uncharacteristically soft. "It's me." Ryan froze. He hadn't spoken to his father since the gala, and the sound of his voice brought back a flood of memories, some painful, some bittersweet. "What do you want?" Ryan asked, his tone guarded. "To talk," Victor said. "In person, if you're willing." Ryan hesitated, then said, "Where?" "There's a park near your apartment," Victor replied. "Tomorrow at noon." Ryan agreed, though his heart was heavy with uncertainty. The next day, Ryan sat on a bench in the park, the crisp autumn air swirling leaves around his feet. He didn't know what to expect from this meeting. Part of him feared it would be another attempt at control, but another part, however small, hoped it might be something more. Victor arrived a few minutes later, dressed more simply than Ryan had ever seen him. There was no suit, no tie, just a man who suddenly looked older than his years. "Thank you for coming," Victor said as he sat beside his son. Ryan said nothing, waiting for his father to speak. Victor took a deep breath. "I've been watching you. Not in a controlling way," he added quickly, "but because I wanted to understand, to see what you've built." Ryan raised an eyebrow. And I was wrong," Victor admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "I was wrong about Emily. About you. About everything." Ryan blinked, caught off guard by the admission. "Why now?" Victor looked out of the park, his expression pained. "Because I've spent my life building walls, and I see now that they've kept out the things that matter most. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just protecting my own pride." Ryan's chest tightened, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He had waited years to hear words like these, but now that they were here, he wasn't sure how to respond. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Ryan said honestly. "I don't expect you to," Victor replied. "I just needed you to know that I see it now. And I want to be better." Ryan studied his father's face, searching for sincerity. For the first time, he saw not the powerful billionaire, but a man who was trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. Emily was surprised when Ryan returned home and told her about the meeting. "Do you believe him?" she asked, her tone cautious. "I think he's trying," Ryan said, "but I don't know if it's enough." Emily nodded, understanding. "It's a start." A week later, Victor reached out again, this time with an invitation. He wanted Ryan and Emily to attend a dinner at the mansion, not as a test or a trap, but as an olive branch. "I want to show you something," Victor said over the phone. "Something I've been working on." Emily was hesitant, but Ryan convinced her to come. If he's serious about changing, maybe this is how we start moving forward. The dinner was unlike anything Ryan had ever experienced at the mansion. The usual glittering guests and stiff formalities were absent. replaced by a small, intimate gathering. Victor greeted them at the door himself, his demeanor humble. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice sincere. The meal was simple but warm, and for the first time, Ryan felt like he could breathe in his father's presence. Emily, too, found herself surprised by Victor's efforts to engage with her, asking about her work and genuinely listening to her answers. After dinner, Victor led them to his study, where stacks of papers and folders covered the desk. "This is what I wanted to show you," he said. "I've been working on a new initiative, one that focuses on community development and support for the underprivileged. Inspired by the work you and Emily have been doing." Ryan's eyes widened as he looked through the documents. The plans were thorough and ambitious, outlining programs for affordable housing, education, and small business support. "You're serious about this?" Ryan asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Victor nodded. "I am, and I want you to be a part of it. Both of you." Emily exchanged a glance with Ryan, her expression wary but hopeful. "This is a big step," she said carefully. "But it has to be about more than redemption. It has to be real." Victor met her gaze, his voice steady. "It is." Over the next few months, the initiative took shape. Victor worked closely with Ryan and Emily, listening to their input and incorporating their ideas. It wasn't always easy. Years of ingrained habits didn't disappear overnight, but Victor's commitment never wavered. The programs launched with great success, bringing tangible change to the community. Ryan and Emily's contributions were celebrated, but what mattered most to them was seeing the impact on the lives of those they helped. For Victor, the initiative became more than just a project. It was a way to rebuild the bridges he had burned. Slowly, he began to earn back his son's trust and Emily's respect. One evening, as they stood together at the opening of a new community center, Victor turned to Ryan and Emily. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for giving me the chance to be better." Ryan placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "Thank you for trying." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "This is just the beginning." And for the first time in years, Victor felt something he thought he had lost: hope.